Hello and welcome to The Intentional Clinician. I'm your host, Paul Krause, licensed professional counselor. Today's episode is part one of my conversation with Mike Speakman. We discuss many topics on a range of issues facing our society today. We discuss how parents could help drug-proof their child, how recovery works, what addiction is, what to do about addiction issues facing our community. We talk about recovery from addiction. We talk about cultural rites of passage and the difficulties of finding those in today's society in the United States. We discuss personal growth through relationships, family, community, and counseling. We also get into how delayed emotional growth in children may contribute to illegal drug use as an adult. We discuss how parents can intervene successfully to help an addicted child, whether that child is a young child or an adult child. And we discuss how everybody can lend a hand to their neighbors and children in their neighborhood to navigate some of the difficulties facing our communities through different forms of addiction. Basically, this is part one. In part two, we discuss anger. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Mike Speakman. I know I did. He is a great mentor, and he has been doing this work for over 30 years. He is a very wise individual, and he is the founder of the PAL groups, which are now in many states, called Parents of Addicted Loved Ones, which is a support group for parents. I have got some feedback asking to explain my new clinic in Grand Rapids, Michigan. As you know, I previously practiced counseling in Phoenix, Arizona for 9 years. Now I am permanently in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and I am now working at a clinic called Health for Life Grand Rapids. This clinic has, of course, myself doing counseling. I do a lot of EMDR therapy here in Michigan, as I haven't met that many other EMDR practitioners, and there seems to be a demand for trauma work. Also in our clinic, we have another male counselor who works with teenagers mostly and their parents, and we have some fantastic female counselors concentrating on a wide range of issues. We have somebody who works a lot with moms, young mothers. We have somebody who works with everybody. She does fantastic work with anxiety and depression. Very awesome stuff, and a few other folks who are at our clinic. So if you want to know more, go to healthforlifegr.com. If you are looking to exclusively work with me, you can go to paulkrausecounseling.com. We also have a naturopathic doctor who is licensed in the state of Arizona to practice medicine, who is giving education here in Michigan as part of her satellite office from her Scottsdale office. That's Dr. Nicole Cain. For more information, go to www.drnicolecain.com. And that is the update on the clinic. So, I hope you enjoy the interview. Let me tell you a little bit about Mike before we get to the interview. Mike is a life coach and licensed substance abuse counselor with a passion for helping parents save a loved one from addiction. His knowledge base comes from experience and a successful career of helping people with substance abuse addictions in residential treatment centers since 1988. He has found a way to translate his expertise into practical steps parents can take to best help their child that is suffering from an addiction. Mike is the founder of PAL, Parents of Addicted Loved Ones. This is a support group of parents helping parents. Groups meet every week to offer education and support at no charge for parents trying to save a son or daughter from addiction. There are presently 19 PAL meetings in the Phoenix, Arizona area, 2 in Tucson, and groups in 17 other states as well at this point. And it's growing. Mike is the author of a book. It is called The 4 Seasons of Recovery for Parents of Alcoholics and Addicts. His book has been called a handbook on recovery from addiction. It is designed to guide parents through the predictable but often unknown stages that adults and people with addictions and also adolescents go through to finally achieve a successful recovery. I've read this book, and this book is about that and so much more. It's about boundaries. It has scripts for conversations. It's fantastic. We'll talk about that more later. Mike also has another area of expertise from his work in treatment centers. In 1991, he developed the first anger management conflict resolution training program for the Salvation Army Adult Rehabilitation Center in Phoenix, Arizona. Since then, he has developed and taught workshops for counselors, the general public, high school and college students, and in the criminal justice system. In 1993, Mike developed the SMARTS training program, a results-based anger management program used in treatment centers and jails across the country. There's a lot more we could say about Mike right now, but let's just get to the interview. So, Mike, welcome to the Intentional Clinician podcast.
Thank you. Good to be here.
All right. So, to kind of get started, we should probably start with a story, which is, you've got a lot of accomplishments, a lot of things we want to talk about, a lot of knowledge to share with our listeners. But first of all, how do we know each other?
Well, that's an interesting story right there. I was referred to you as a person who works with adolescents with problems, substance abuse problems and other problems. And I work with parents of adult children. And so I thought, well, we might get together here so we could refer back and forth. And then after I got talking to you, I found out that we had a lot in common as far as the way we approached the issues and trying to help people, that we just really had a lot in common in that area. And then we started talking about doing a program, expanding the anger curriculum, which I developed many years ago, expanding it out to a more and more reach of treatment centers and also to getting it eventually into jails.
That's right. We were working on our project called Anger 101, which you own the website to, and we found out that this was quite a large project.
Yes.
I think it's all right to talk about a little of our intent for any of the listeners who might be interested. Mike has developed great anger management and conflict resolution workbooks and just basically a whole book, a training program. And we had gotten together with a former chief of police, was it?
Or he was a police commander at one point.
Yeah. Kim. Mm-hmm. And we were working with him also on trying to make a series of videos, which would be much easier to distribute to jails and prisons for people incarcerated to learn anger management skills and life skills, so that when they got out, that they could be more productive in society and have less incidents of anger, which may have possibly gotten them in there in the first place. Yes. We realized that making these videos and writing this was a huge undertaking, almost more difficult than writing a book in some ways, because there's so many elements. So we were not able to get our funding together for that and the time available, but we might still do it in the future. We'll see what happens.
Yep, that's right.
We're hoping to possibly do it in the future, but right now we have the awesome book you made, so we can use that for working with people. Go ahead. Do you have any comments?
No, I just it's just that I'm retired, semi-retired, and I'm working harder than I did when I was working full time at treatment centers.
Right. So you still see people. You see clients now. A lot of parents of young adults who have addiction issues. Is that true?
Yes, I still have my private practice where I work with parents who have children with substance abuse problems, and I help them develop a plan for how to best help their child. It's very confusing for parents today, and rightfully so.
Yes, absolutely. I want to get into kind of more about what can parents do in emotional development after I kind of hear a little bit more about Mike Speakman, so our listeners can know who you are. So now I said I was going to ask you about your story, but we'll have to do a little bit of an abbreviated version.
Well, basically my story starts with my being on the garage floor in my house with the garage door closed and the car engine turned on, and me laying down and wanting to end it all. I was 36 years old. My wife had left me. She had left me because of my own addictions. Alcohol was one of them. There were other things going on. Not proud of that. That became, as looking back, that was my bottom to get my attention, to get some help for myself. So that's what I did do. And that was my bottom. So 10 years after that incident, I was age 46 years old at this point. I'm working for Salvation Army and as a substance abuse counselor at that time, and that began my new career. So here I am today.
Wow,
that was 1988, by the way.
Yes. Yeah. When you were 46.
Yes, exactly.
So you have a lot of personal experience going through a lot of the things that you're helping parents and also young people sometimes with today.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I don't know anybody else, if they didn't have some kind of a story involved with this, why they would want to be in this field.
Yes, we've all been affected either personally, directly. Most likely most people have been in this field have been directly personally impacted, and or having family members or close loved ones impacted by all sorts of different issues in depression, anxiety, substance issues, everything going on. So tell me a little bit more. I know that was really abbreviated. So a little bit more about you, just anything that kind of comes into your head. What made you, after you hit bottom, what helped you get back to where you are now, helping so many people?
That's a good point. Actually, counseling, I tell people counseling saved my life. So the first thing that I did when I caught myself wanting to end it all and had that sort of awareness that, no, I'm not ready to end it all. And before that, I was unwilling to ask for help. So now at this point, I tell people it scared me humble. So at this point, it scared me that I was really willing to do that. It wasn't that I wanted to die and end it all. It was that I couldn't get rid of the pain, the emotional pain I was feeling from the loss of my wife leaving me. It felt like I lost my whole family. I had 2 great children, and I didn't lose them, but it felt like, in the divorce, I felt like I was losing them. So that pain drove me to attempt suicide, which then was a wake-up call for me to finally ask for help and receive it. So I remember that what I did was I stood up and turned the car engine off. After probably about 3 minutes, I went in and called my sister and asked for help. And she gave me the name of a good counselor, and that began my recovery program. I had no idea where I was going, and that 10 years later I would be in this field.
Wow. And so then you went through counseling and you did the work. You did your inner work.
Quite a bit of it. Quite a bit of it. I was a tough nut not to work on. I kind of feel sorry for the counselors that I worked with. And my brother got help for himself a couple of years later through the AA program. So his help came from AA, and which is a great program, and mine came more through counseling and groups. Mm-hmm. And so that's what got me into this field.
Well, I really appreciate you telling such a personal story on the podcast. I'm sure our listeners will hopefully appreciate it because, you're being real, and I know from, being your friend and, you're kind of a mentor to me that you definitely keep it real and do not, cut corners, so to speak, when you're talking to people, but you're very compassionate as well.
Well, I try to be. The only thing is, it's hard for me to do that with my wife, so that's the challenge. So I can do it with other people easier,
Yeah.
But I'm working on that.
Yeah.
It's a work in progress.
Yeah, it's always, it's interesting. That's a whole nother topic, but it's interesting how when you're around your family members that you've been around your whole life, or your wife who you've been around for how many years, I don't know if you've been together now, but a while, that you've got all these coping skills, all these great ways to resolve conflict, anger management. We've got our higher self. We've maybe been doing some work on empathy and love and humanizing people, and then they tell you that you forgot to do you left dishes in the sink, and the next thing you know, you're back to level 1 where you feel like, oh my gosh, I just became a 21-year-old again for about 30 seconds and something like that.
Yes, that's the challenge that I have. It's hard for me to apply to myself, but my wife lets me know that. So she's helping me grow, and I feel like I'm helping her grow.
That's great. I remember you actually, that throws into my mind a comment you made a while ago about to me when we were talking about friendship and some difficulties I was going through with some friends at the time. I don't know exactly what you said, so I'm going to turn it over to you, but my gist that I got from it was that you're interested in becoming friends with people and being friends with people and staying friends with people that are interested in continuing to grow as people.
Yes, I think that's important because a lot of people are at a certain time in their life maybe not interested in growing, maybe more interested in having a career and having what the world offers to us to be successful. And that's the way I had been. That's all I had been interested in at that time. And the concept of growth made no sense to me, that is. But now I realize it's wanting to become a better person by asking for help and receiving help, and and so I'm in the counseling field now. But back before my wake-up call, I'd be a million miles from a counselor. There's no way you could get me to talk to one. So it's scary to grow, but I think that is subject for all of us to consider. We have a lot of young people today who are looking at our society and wanting to grow up and be successful, and looking for answers because they are able to see a lot of people who seemingly have everything that the society is to offer us as far as being successful: career, money, fortune, fame, family, all of that. But they're not happy. There's something missing.
Yes.
And I think the children, the young people today, they're so smart compared to, they're smarter every year, and they know so many things. They can know so much that they see sort of the cracks in our cultural knowledge base, and it's like it creates this division and challenge for us as parents. And so I think we started off talking about friendship. So I know myself, I want to grow, and I want to be around people who want to grow, because we can be more honest with each other and confront one another when we need to, be more caring, and so that's, to me, that's a very important thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we're almost getting into some of that, talking about that emotional growth and development. I think we'll save that for a moment. Is there anything else, you want to tell the listeners about yourself before we move into what you're interested in these days?
Well, you mean sort of self-revealing?
Well, self-revealing, or anything that you are, pondering about your own life that you feel like could be of value to the
that's a
people
good point.
on the
That's a
podcast.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
There's several things. Number one, I'll be 75 in September,
Right.
and I'm contemplating my own demise.
Right.
I mean, it's interesting how when I was young, it's like, I'm going to live forever, so I'm not even interested in life insurance.
Right.
Let alone consider buying it. I don't even want to hear about it. So there comes a time in a person's life when, and I heard Denzel Washington say it in a movie one time, talking to a younger man he was working with. He said, "I've got less life ahead of me than I have behind me." And I had never heard it put that way, but that's an interesting way to put that. And so it is something that I think about. I try not to worry a lot about it. One of the interesting things that I heard recently, talking about facts of suicide, because I'm technically a survivor of a suicide attempt. I don't even think about
Right.
that often, but the highest rate of suicide in our society is men age 75 and older.
Really?
Yeah. So I thought that was interesting. We hear a lot about young people committing suicide, which
Right.
that is a real tragedy, in my opinion. But it's interesting to note that, and so that's something that's on my mind that I talk about and deal with. The other thing is I really enjoy playing poker.
Okay.
So I switching subjects here. I preach to the people I work with, both the parents I work with and the addicts and alcoholics, who occasionally I get an opportunity to work with, but much more parents and spouses and other family members. The importance of having fun activities in your life.
Right.
Recreation is something important. So I can't do the active physical recreations stuff like so much anymore. But I enjoy poker. I enjoy going to movies. I've got friends who are interested in growth, and I have other friends who are not. We just don't spend a lot of time with them.
Sure.
So it's not a put down kind of a thing.
Sure. Yeah, that's right. I mean, I remember that. That was the other part of it. You said that you had friends from your past, and you still got together with them. It's just that you weren't spending as much active time with them because of just your different paths at that moment in life.
Exactly.
Because, it's important to welcome all comers. And I know that's something you do. You welcome all, when I've been to any of your talks or, seen the attendance at a PAL meeting, you're welcoming all walks of life, all different cultures, people from the vast differences in socioeconomic status, all realms of religion, political thought, whatever. They're all welcome at your talks. They're welcome at your PAL meetings, and I think that's a really important point.
Yes, that's something that I sort of embraced, and then when I went to work for Salvation Army, I found that as a giant organization that they embrace that exactly, and I was really pleased and really enjoyed my time working with them. I wound up working about 13 years altogether with Salvation Army, 9 years down in Phoenix and 3.5 years up in California at the treatment center up there. So I have nothing but good things to say about Salvation Army. Even though they're a
Yes.
fundamentalist Christian organization, they are
Yes.
very, very accepting of everybody. And so anyway, nice for you to notice that about me. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's one of the things that, interested me, about you. One of the things was when I read your book, I was just floored at the way, there's certain authors, you read their poetry or you read a book and you're like, oh my gosh, they're reading my mind. Mm-hmm. Well, when I read your book, The Four Seasons of, how does it say it? The Four Seasons of Recovery for Parents of Alcoholics and Addicts. Mm-hmm. I was at first, thinking, well, this is just about substance abuse and recovery. I've heard all that. Mm-hmm. And then of course, that's my assumption brain that keeps happening. Sure. And then when I read it, I was just floored. I was thinking, oh my gosh, you were reading my mind. I've had these conversations with people. I've had these conversations with people possibly in my family. I did not, and it helped me with my own boundaries, not even with, even dealing with the substance issues, but just dealing with life. I couldn't believe how, and you had so many tools in there. And then when we got to talking more, and having coffee, and having to finally dash off to our destinations 3 or 4 hours later, even when we weren't working on the anger project, just chatting, I realized, you really had this opening. You really had an open mind to anything. You don't seem to just make up your mind about something and stand still. So you're still growing. You're open, and you have a lot of life experience that has, I think, informed your work. And so there's no biases going on, and I really enjoyed that about you, and how you're obviously continuing to grow, and then how we, as a younger person, I'm only in my early 30s, we could just, obviously I don't have as much life experience, so I don't have as much to draw from anecdotally, but we could just talk about any topic, and and it was a lot of fun, so I appreciate that.
Well, thank you.
So I've learned a lot from you. I wanted to, I know we're going to talk about PAL, we're going to talk about your book, your anger book, and some other things coming up here, but I wanted to talk a little bit about, what are you interested in these days?
These days, one of the things that I'm working on is a book for parents of adolescents.
Okay.
Because the book that you're referring to is for parents of adult addicts and alcoholics, and
that's right.
And there's a big difference there. Adults are empowered, and adolescents have no power in our society legally, and that's an important distinction. So the working title of the book is How to Help Drug-Proof Your Child.
Oh.
And I'm very quick to say in the book, several times through the book, there is no way to drug-proof a child. However,
sure.
There are things you can do to help, and that's why the word help is in the title. And the chief among those ideas is to be able to reduce the benefits and payoffs they get from using drugs. And so that is something a parent cannot stop them from experimenting. I believe most children will, most adolescents, because we live in a drug culture.
Sure.
This is the time we live right now. But there's some things parents can do that's going to help their adolescent not get so much benefit from the use of drugs. People who continue to use them, the adolescents who continue to use them, it is serving a purpose for them. It is helping them in some way. Not always obvious. So the book is going to help parents understand there's some things they can do while their child is still an adolescent, approximately age 12 to 18. And it'll give them some ideas and some practical tools they can do.
Now, I'm going to ask you a prep question real
Okay.
quick. 'Cause I'm going to talk a little bit about adolescent community reinforcement approach, the ACRA program, which I'm trained as a trainer to train, and I'm a certified counselor in. But I want to ask you a question, so I'm priming you.
Oh, that's
Do you
good.
mind giving a couple tips when I'm done talking about maybe one or two things that are on your mind that can help parents drug-proof their kids.
No, I don't mind that at all.
Okay, so I'm going to quick jump into it.
Okay.
Interesting what you're talking about is I did talk about the training program that I'm part of, that I did work for a long time with adolescents. Now I'm working a lot more with young adults, and I'm working somewhat with the parents of young adults like you, although if you're around, I'll refer them to you usually. But one of the things we talk a lot about in that program is pro-social activities. Getting your kid involved in one or two pro-social activities with positive role models, or a team-based approach, or a music or an art or something like that. But at least something social really helps. It's pro-social, of course, is the opposite of antisocial behaviors.
Exactly.
Another thing which really helped in the program was parents really investing in loving their child through this and working with their child on what we call the happiness scale. So, a lot of times when teenagers are upset, everything is either wonderful or terrible. But if they're upset, of course, everything is terrible. My parent is terrible. My parent is evil. So what we would do is have the parent fill out a happiness scale about their relationship with the child, and it had issues involved. So happiness everywhere from 10 being very happy and 0 being very unhappy, so that people could see the nuances and see the gray in the relationship with their child and what's going on behaviorally. And also the child would then fill out a happiness scale about their relationship with their parent and things at home such as allowance or grounding or being able to go out. And then when we would look at that together, and sometimes we wouldn't just reveal it because the adolescent would be doesn't want to let their parent know what their answers are, but they would pick a couple topics that they wanted to talk about or negotiate with the parent. And when we could make peace and maybe just negotiate on one item, which of course a lot of times with adolescents is allowance or letting me go out, and the parent would negotiate a little bit with, of course, their upset part with their child was grades or chores. If we could broker some type of deal, you would see their happiness as parent-child go up, and you would see their understanding of each other come up together. And if parents can have that empathy, because they're usually angry, I don't want my kid being a drug addict. They can't have green hair. They can't do this. They've got to wear a tie and go to real estate school and church every week. They have these really rigid expectations. The child rebels against that. They're gonna rebel even further. So when the parent had the empathy for the child, and then the child, of course, plays off their parents. Children are sponges for what's going on, less about what's being said, more about what's being done with their parents. So when they saw their parents flip the empathy switch on, even if their parent was still lecturing them sometimes, they could then identify with the parent and be vulnerable and open up about what's really going on at school. And as you said, drugs are ubiquitous.
Yeah.
I used to say to the kids in the program, I can't stop you from using drugs. We could walk out this door, and when I meant that, we were working in a rough neighborhood in Phoenix called Maryville, and we could walk out this door, and within 10 minutes, I bet we could score some drugs.
Absolutely.
So it's not about being away from drugs. It's about finding things that reinforce not using drugs and making your life happier. Because if your life is happier, then you're not going to be using it for a coping mechanism or to fit in or to escape from the pain of your household or whatever. That turned out to be a longer tangent than I thought. So, do you have any tips here for parents who are trying to drug-proof and help drug-proof their child?
Yes, one of the tips that's going to be in the book, one of the chapters is going to be about, and some detail about how to pull this off, and that is allowing your adolescent child at times. This isn't all the time, every time, but it's also never. And so that's what tends to be with our adolescents. This is at times allowing them to have an opinion that's different than yours, and validating it, and letting them know it's okay for you to have a different opinion from me. That's not saying that it's okay to do the action associated with the opinion. So we're separating their opinions from their actions, and so a good example of that would be, it's okay for you, Johnny, you're 17 years old, for you to believe that this country should legalize heroin because you read that it is legal in England, which it is.
Oh, okay.
So, notice what normal reaction a parent would have with a 17-year-old son who says, I think heroin should be legal in this country like it is in England.
Oh my goodness.
So here's an example
Yeah.
where a parent would have another choice here, and that would be to say, Johnny, that's a valid point of view. It's not my point of view, but I want you to know that you can have an opinion different than mine. However, I also want you to know at the same time that if you get involved with it in any way, shape, or form, I'll kick your butt from here to China. So I'm
Right.
separating the
Right.
actions from the opinions, because from a sense of empowerment, a person needs to be able to hold their own opinions and feel like it can be validated. So that is one of, there's three basic skill sets that we're teaching them, and that's one of those that we're teaching them. Because what we're trying to do, and to understand the importance of that, is to see some basic child development. And that's why I started the parent support group, is because I could see the difference in how parents were reacting to an addicted adult. And again, all the treatment centers I've worked in were adults.
Right.
So I could see how parents were handling an addicted adult child versus how a spouse was handling their addicted spouse versus a brother or sister handling it. As you can see, different relationships there. The parents, it was, obviously it's different, you're the parent, but it was different in a certain way. It was different in a certain way. It was different in a way that only child development concepts, simple child development concepts, could explain. But then the explanation of those child development concepts tied in with the addiction and really opened the door for a greater, deeper understanding as a parent, how I can help you if you're 18, 28, 38, 48, 58 years old.
Yes.
Because with the addiction, it doesn't change, even though a lot of things change in a person's life. As long as they're actively in their addiction, it doesn't change. The dynamics stay the same. So teaching them about adolescent behaviors and the fact that we live in a culture who doesn't really have a structured rite of passage. This is a problem with our culture. This is no one to blame specifically. It's not parents' fault or
Sure.
grandparents' fault. That basically what I was saying is that child development issues collide with addiction issues in the drug age that we live in to produce potentially hopelessness in parents.
Right.
So that was the way to sum that whole issue up. And so then the concept is, okay, how does childhood development fit in there? Well, basically, you're still parenting an adult as if they were still a child.
Right.
And not even realizing that, because there was no interruption point to say, okay, I'm a man now, I'm a woman now, start parenting me different, Dad, Mom.
Yes.
And for the parents to be able to say, yes, you're a man, you're a woman, we're going to start feeding you, that is a great big blank spot in our culture. And it gets worse every year, only because we continue to move forward further with the modern day technology of communication, but farther and farther away from the village concept that we had many years ago. We lived in villages.
Right.
And so there was a natural camaraderie between people. And so in the village, you trusted your neighbors. You knew your neighbors. Your neighbors knew your children. Your neighbors could interact with your children. Your neighbors could impart a disciplinary learning event for them.
Right.
And your child
Hold them accountable.
Hold them accountable. And your child could actually learn an unnamed life adult coping skill, because we live in a culture where they're unnamed. 100 years ago, 90% of the population lived in farming communities.
Yes.
And so it really lent itself to teaching through teachable moments what we could call adult coping skills.
Right.
So we live in a culture that not only do we not teach them, we don't even have a list of them. So there's just sort of this hope that it just somehow happens magically.
Right. So,
and that's where PAL came from, was from that.
Right. And so we're moving into this discussion a little bit. We'll get into PAL in a moment, but I want to talk a little bit about this, more about this, the collision of emotional maturity, childhood development, and addiction, but also a little bit culturally, and we'll bring it back to the people. But culturally speaking, we live in a culture where you said technology, and I don't think you just mean phones and computers. I think you mean the availability 24 hours a day of whatever you want: consumer goods, food, the gym, massages, spa services, radio, television, YouTube, all of that. And so there's almost a natural rhythm is not there. Because even if we were in the village and all the lights were on 24 hours, which they weren't 100 years ago, we're out of rhythm a little bit. And then also, people are lonely, lonelier than ever. I saw a study, which I keep trying to find on the internet, but about most people today report having 1 or 2 people at most that they can talk to, where in the 80s it was 3 or 4, and in the 60s it was upwards of 4 and 5. Having people that they could intimately discuss things with, not just a surface conversation. So there's part of that going on. And then also not having a definable rite of passage. So one of the things about the United States is we're a younger country. We're a melting pot where other countries and cultures have been around for thousands of years. We're kind of like a new experiment.
Yeah.
My grandfather, of course, came over through Ellis Island. On my other side, I have Norwegian and Swedish people that came over to farm in Minnesota and Illinois just maybe 40 years before he came over in the 20s. And so we all have a little bit of our own, whatever country we came from, Europe, Asia, in subcontinent, Africa, we all have these different traditions. People come from all over. I've just named a few. But we have not in the United States agreed upon, which you have told me, a set of adult coping skills and a rite of passage to become an adult. And so, of course, what I see a lot in my practice, and I deal with this a lot, and so do you, is I'm working with either parents or young adults or teenagers, and I'm working with them to develop the ability to have boundaries, to have to define their role, to be able to, especially monetarily today.
Yes, the one thing that's going to be in the book for parents of adolescents is that we're talking about is letting them have their own opinion. And the reason that's so important is because one of the things about adolescent time is adolescents really have lost their identity. And if we look at it, this child development piece, from a simplified way of looking at it, instead of getting all complicated, when you're a child, let's say from birth to somewhere around 12 or 13, prior to puberty, you have a solid identity. You're so-and-so's son, so-and-so's daughter. Puberty comes along, and all of a sudden, you're kicked into a new space. You can see adulthood coming. You're not a child anymore. Your whole body has changed. And so now you're not a child anymore, and you're not an adult yet. So it's kind of like identity lost. And this explains some of the adolescent behavior where it's so important to feel like they're part of something. So important what other people think of them.
Right.
Because they have no sense of self, so they're trying to figure out from other people's way of treating them. So as a parent, when you say, I value your opinion equal to mine, even though it's different than mine, I'm telling you that that's part of your identity, that you can be a separate person from me. It's preparing you from that time. It's preparing you for what I call the magic moment, your 18th birthday. In 1 second, your whole life changed, and not just a little bit. It changed from zero power in this world to all power, and there's no period of adjustment. So that's, again, goes back to why I started PAL. But now, talking to parents of adolescents, now you can do some things to prepare your child for the magic moment. And again, PAL is based on the fact that, hey, there's no period of adjustment from childhood to adulthood. And that's what adolescence is supposed to be, where the child can practice being an adult in a safe environment where the parents not only allow them to practice, meaning allow them to make mistakes and fail.
So key. We'll get to that.
Yeah. Allow them to do that and have some understanding of why that's important. So parents need to understand, it's helpful for them to understand why you need to let your child have a different opinion, why you let them share power with you. You're preparing for their adulthood.
Right, and let them make mistakes and learn without lecturing them and making them fearful. I've run into, hold that for a second. Yeah. I've run into so many young adults who are terrified to try anything
Absolutely.
that isn't exactly going to class and turning in a paper. in college or going to their job that they hate because they hear their parents' voice in their head saying, be careful, is that too much money? Make sure you do it right. There's so many people competing in the economy these days. You need to be prepared. You need to be the best. You are the best. You are a kid. We want you. We want to be proud of you. They hear all these messages, and so they're afraid to do anything because everyone knows, and I'm not too far past it. I'm only 34, but everyone knows that when you start out trying something new and becoming who you want to become and maybe going down a career path or just experimenting is this career even for me? Is this major even for me? You're going to make tons of mistakes. Right now I'm starting off podcasting. I'm sure I'm going to make tons of mistakes and I don't like it. My ego and my, part of myself goes, ooh, why did that have to happen? But I know now because I've lived this long past my adolescence that it's inevitable, even if I don't like it. With each new experience, I'm going to make mistakes, and that's so important for parents to know, and not to fill their child's head with fear, but to prepare them to, you're making mistakes. That's part of learning. Also, I was reading in a book the other day, and this is something I really believe, that when parents put too much of their expectations on their child, or cultural expectations, or religious expectations, or too much, they are not letting the child be who they are. They're not letting them have their own sense of identity. Instead of presenting things as, here's what I believe in, you're an actual person and I'm honoring your personhood. They're saying you're my son and you're my daughter or whatever, way past the age where they need that. They need that concreteness when they're young. But you're right, in adolescence, it's training to become an adult, because in 18, immediately, you can join the military, go to college, smoke cigarettes, buy lottery tickets. You can't drink yet, but you can move out of your parents' house with no legal repercussions and go move in with a significant other or go live on the street or whatever you want to do. Go jump on the train. And
you can own a business. You can own property.
Right.
That's what I'm saying.
Take out loans.
All power
Sure.
in 1 second, no period of adjustment. And that, so to get back to the how to help drug-proof your child.
Yes, sorry.
No, that's okay. How to help drug-proof your child. Then one of the things that when my first book came out, I began to hear from parents who said, Mike, this is helping me with my adult son who's an addict. But I've noticed it's also helping me with my younger kids that are at home. So there's a takeaway even in my first book. So now I'm building on that. So it's hard for parents to raise a child into adulthood with no instructions.
Right.
We do the best we can with what we have, but this is a hidden flaw in our culture that ties into so many other things. The natural thing about adolescence too is black and white only thinking. Everything is either right or wrong, good or bad. Now, what happens is if they don't go into their adulthood and add the gray in between, meaning something could be both good and bad at the same time.
Sure.
And I could see both sides of that equation. Then that's going to be problematic for them the rest of their life. So this understanding from the parents, this is the drug culture age that we live in. This is providing the motivation then for parents to say, maybe pick up that book and say, all right, there's some things that I maybe look at, because it's uncomfortable to let your child have their own opinion. It's uncomfortable to let them make decisions that you don't agree with and let them fail. And I think this is going to be a challenge of the book when it comes out. If it ever comes out, I'm still working on it.
I'm sure it'll come out. I'm going to make sure of that. Yeah. I'll call you.
But I tell you, the problem is, if you look at the closely held beliefs we have as human beings, very personal ones that are not subject to change because they're so important to us.
Right.
One of those is religion. And notice when people argue about religion, how they can get violent about that.
Oh, yes.
Another is politics, the same thing. But a third one is parenting.
Yes.
So it's it's going to be very challenging for parents to buy the book and read the book, and it's going to take courage for them. And I think there's plenty out there that have that courage.
I believe they are, because people are looking for answers.
Yes.
Any parent that I talked to that read your book has been raving about it, and usually bought copies for other people. And so I think that's why I think people really like your book, and there's a need there because people are not sure what to do. Like I can't remember, but I think we were joking about your child. You had a child and there was no handbook handed to you about what to do.
Yeah.
I mean, I know there's what to expect when you're expecting and all that, but I mean, really, past when children are little, what do you do with the teenagers? So I wanted to touch on a little bit of Rite of Passages and one of your ideas about kind of a global transformation we can all do, taking it from the personal to the global idea. But for a moment there, I was trying to think about, you sparked in me, you said parents may not be comfortable reading this book and finding this out. And I my idea or assumption there was, are parents fearful? I'm trying to ask a yes or no question, but is this a fear factor? Are parents afraid of what's going to happen to my child when they leave my house, so I've got to control them all I can? And then the paradox being that when you control your child too tightly, when they do leave your home and go to college or go off to work or go off to the army or whatever they do, or go off to the relationship, then they have no idea how to control themselves. And to have an internal locus of control, they've got an external locus of control, the mother and the father or whoever is raising them, holding them too close in the nest. And so when you say people are uncomfortable, because it means relinquishing a little bit of your control and acknowledging your fear. I think a lot of people parent out of fear. What do you have to say about that?
Yes, we do parent out of fear because that's what works, and that's what worked on us, and that is natural and normal for parents to do that. But you're right, there is this dynamic between the parent and the child, that any change in parenting the child will affect the parent as well. So hopefully there's a possibility for the parents to grow, and growing in a way, we mentioned growing before. One of the ways to be more specific about this, if we talk about personal growth, growing more into the person that I am already, but allowing myself to become more of who I already am, is a way of looking at growth. Yes. And that's, again, an identity issue. Another way of looking at it is spiritual growth. So an emotional growth, meaning that I'm more together. One of the definitions that I like from a very famous psychiatrist is that one of the ways to look at personal and spiritual and emotional growth is that I am able to solve my problems better. My problems are not as big as they used to be. I can literally outgrow my need for my problems, as she put it. That's what growth can offer me. So growth happens in our culture by going to see a counselor, like I did, going to a treatment center like addicts and alcoholics do. There seems like there has to be something wrong with us, to get our attention. Yes. A bottom, like they use the term in addiction and recovery. He hit his bottom. I hit my bottom.
Rock bottom, right?
Rock bottom. We hear that term. And I think what it's revealing is that our culture is limited because its real goal is to be successful financially and have a good education and get married and have children and raise them and be happy.
Right. There's that American dream type of thing everyone's striving for more and more.
It's not bad. It's just that it's incomplete.
Sure. It's incomplete.
It's incomplete.
Where's the rite of passage?
Exactly. And so I think that's the challenge that we have. And one of the ways I look at addiction is it's a wake-up call for a person that they need to grow, whether you want to say spiritually, emotionally, beyond physical and intellectually. See,
absolutely.
So that's what we're talking about. So the average person can just have a life where they're not growing and be content with that, but they won't really have a sense of fulfillment with that. Yes. So that's the theory. And yet they need some kind of a wake-up call. Well, that's where Rite of Passage comes in.
Right.
So in cultures, tribal cultures who have a structured Rite of Passage, the children see it coming when they're younger. They already know it's coming. They're still afraid of it.
Sure.
But it consists of 3 parts. All the rites of passage have 3 parts. Number 1 is education. You're learning about how an adult operates. This is what a man does. About spirituality, about sexuality, about your place in this world. about relationships, about friendships, about fun, about everything.
Work.
All of those things.
Right.
Because all of those are different for adolescents than they are for adults. A lot of them are. So education's a part. So in tribal cultures, you're not taught by your parents, you're taught by the elders.
Right.
And so there's a period of education. And then something else happens. Puberty kicks in.
Right.
Puberty kicks in. A good example. One example is a tribe. The elders will call the boy in and say, here's a knife. It's time for you to go out, leave the village, go out into the jungle, go out into the desert, go out into the forest, wherever you live. Count the number of sons, number of days. After 12 sons, come back. The child invariably says, I'm scared, I'll die out there. And it's natural and normal to have that fear. It's fear of death. Although they may not totally understand what death is, but it's a fear of death. And so here's what the elders say, and this is, I think, is very powerful for us to pick up as parents and as people in this culture. The elders look at them and say, look, we believe in you. You're supposed to be afraid. We know you're afraid, but we believe in you. In fact, we believe in you more than you believe in yourself. That's why we're sending you out. This is the trial part. We're sending you out there. If we didn't believe in you, we'd let you stay here where you're safe. But you would never grow in to the man. You would always be a boy, but you'd be in a man's body. And you would actually be dead inside your heart. So we will not allow that. We will not tolerate that. And so the child's still scared to death, goes out there, and he could die out there.
Sure.
You know, could die out there. But what happens is, traditionally what will happen is the boy will be scared to death and hide and run and, you know, and just start talking to God and who knows all the different things to do. Not even hungry, not even sleeping at first. And after a while, hunger. Got a knife. He'll go find something to eat.
Right.
After a few days, he starts to transform. And this is transformation. Transformation is different than change. It's a change beyond the ability to comprehend it.
Right.
It's unspeakable. And there's no words for it. So what happens is eventually they begin to get a sense of, I'm part of nature. I can deal with nature all by myself. And this is important because now they realize I'm a separate person and at the same time I'm part of my village and part of my family.
Yes.
But I'm part of nature. And that's kind of what's missing in our culture a lot, I think. It was much more that when we were farming communities because we were close to the land.
Absolutely. I have so many comments on this, and then let's get to part 3.
So part 3, then, he comes back,
right.
And they have the ceremony for him. Yes, you are the man. And, you know, you will talk about your adventures, and we will listen. And by the way, after this ceremony, now, this is so important, we have a ceremony for the parents to let him go.
Yes.
So those are the 3 parts of the Rite of Passage. The education, the trial, the ceremony. Interestingly enough, Israel has all 3.
Yes.
Israel has, that's one of the few civilized countries that I know of that has all 3. They have the education, they have the ceremony, and the trial is the universal service that they have.
The military, you have to enroll for everyone, 1 or 2 years, is it?
I think it's either 18 months or 2 years.
Something like that.
But at age 18, you automatically do that. You have no choice. Which, by the way, I think would be a great idea for our country, and that's another subject. But that would help our society in 100 different ways.
Sure.
You know.
Well, actually, since you're on that, and we'll go back to the parent metaphor with the ceremony and the becoming an adult. But I did like your idea about everyone in the U.S. having to sign up for some type of program. Not just say the military, but what were you calling it the other day? Universal
service. That means that they might go into the military, but they also might work on roads. They might work in forests. They might help work in the national parks. That's how national parks were built by the WPA in the 30s.
Right.
And those were men who went into, and by the way, when they did the WPA, the public works thing, they actually used the military, the government used the military to organize it.
Sure.
So they had the organization of them, and they built the national parks. They built dams. They built roads, and we've kind of forgot about that. But they don't have to all go into the army or to the military.
Right, and also I believe not only with infrastructure and parks, but I'm thinking they could also choose to do social services in the cities or the country or in the rural areas.
Absolutely.
To help kids. I mean, our schools are in desperate need of more hands on deck, and mentors for the kids in the urban and rural area. Well, really anywhere. Kids are needing mentors these days, people that are plugged in. So I think I think that would be fantastic. I don't know if we'd ever get that implemented, that it's required.
That would be a horrendous big challenge, because there's so many private interests that get paid for the things that this would get rid of.
That's correct.
Negative things this would get rid of. It wouldn't totally get rid of crime, but it would take such a great big bite out of it. It wouldn't totally get rid of drug addiction and alcoholism, but it would take such a big bite out of it.
To give people purpose, meaning.
Poverty. It would take a bite out of poverty. And we'd stop building all these jails and prisons. And so that's the only political thing that I really talk about these days. It's just a personal thing that I believe strongly in.
Well, it's very utilitarian, practical, because it's not only helping the country and the people and the environment we're living in, but it's helping young people feel that they're a part of something, that they have skills, that they can work on a team with other people their age. And when you really serve people, which we've been talking about, when you give up your pursuit of happiness and your rigid way of needing me to have what I need to be content, so you think, and you serve others, and you give up of yourself, even doing some volunteer work, even just a couple hours a year or whatever, there's a sense of happiness that comes from that, and contentment and joy that is, again, can only be explained through transformation, because I cannot explain it to you if you have not experienced it.
Exactly.
And so right there, I believe you're right. It would take a bite out of crime, drug addiction, but also I think it would take a bite out of people just buying things to fill their life because they feel empty inside.
It would be a transformation of our country, and a positive one. It'd just be hard to get everybody all on board to that. But
That's true.
But the positive things you're talking about for the adolescents, is exactly what identity is all about. So when we talk about person, he just doesn't know who he is yet. When we heard that saying, or trying to find himself, we have sayings in our culture that indicate concepts about identity. But it's a challenging thing to wrap your arms around the concept of what do you mean by identity. It's very very ethereal in a way. But what happens is, with this trial, a foundation comes together for the person. They have a foundation within their mind, within their personhood, to build their life on. So the analogy we use in recovery is, you're building sort of the house of your life, which is your career, your schooling, your family, marriage, your children, your home. That's the house of your life. But what if you have no foundation? That's where drugs and alcohol comes in.
Right.
It will fall.
Right.
And then, what if you then say, that's too hard to build a foundation, so I'll just build a smaller house. That'll fall. Okay, a spiritual house. That'll fall. So this helps us understand the chronic relapsers. There's a term in recovery where people just are not getting it, and they're just going into treatment after treatment and stuff. So it's this concept then of universal service would be our civilized form of trial. Now, look at the addicts and alcoholics today, a lot of them. They're creating their own trials, high-risk behaviors.
Sure.
And they're creating their own trials. So,
incarceration, breakup, disease.
Driving drunk and on drugs and all the things, risking of needles. And it's like they don't care about themselves, and because they don't really know themselves. And that's what the education part and the trial part is for.
So important. And I see this even with people that aren't getting into those addictions. They're getting into other addictions or having difficulties with young adults. I work with young adults, as you know, a lot, people between 18 and 32 that are just trying to figure out what to do vocationally, which I'll probably talk about in another episode, but what to do with their life, how to have relationships, how to have boundaries with their parents, all of these things. And I believe you're right, that there isn't the education and there's not the trial. There certainly is the college graduation, or I got my first job celebration. So there's a ceremony, but the ceremony isn't celebrating, I think, fully what needs to happen, because a lot of times kids will get their job, they'll move out, or they'll move in with a significant other, or they'll go to college, and guess who's still paying for everything?
Exactly.
Mom and dad. And
Exactly.
I know that we live in a hard economic time, and it's been difficult since 2008 at least, but that doesn't mean that we should just continually pay our child's cell phone bill till they're 45. So with that, because that isn't teaching them anything. So parents are almost having to create their own system through PAL, your group, through going to counseling and therapy, because we don't have an agreed upon norm. And that is one of the biggest things I see missing, because I know you got comments here, but you said, when the boy, they said we could keep you in the village, boy, but then you'll be a boy in a man's body. And that boy will be empty inside, and they'll hate themselves. And we can say the same thing about women as well.
Absolutely.
Of course, we're just using boys as an example. But I see that a lot because of a person doesn't move out of their parents' home, even if it, sometime, and without having those boundaries, and they don't have to not move out. It could be that they moved into a dorm or an apartment, but their parent is too enmeshed in their life to the point where they're trying to help them, they think. They're not ready to leave yet. They need more help. They need my nurturing. They're having emotional breakdowns when their laundry is dirty and their dishes are in the sink. So I'm going to come over and clean their house, or I'm going to pay for a maid, or I'm going to buy them a new car when they crash their old one. And what they're trying to do is help. They're not ready to leave the nest, but they don't understand that leaving the nest is the trial for some kids. Just leaving home and not being able to rely on you for every little thing is their trial, and they're going to be emotional about it, and they're going to be upset, and they're going to say, I'm going to die, Mom. I'm going to die, Dad. I need more money. And they're like, well, why did you spend all your money on fast food? Why didn't you buy groceries? And that kid needs to go through that. They're not going to starve.
Yeah, exactly.
They're going to find a way.
Exactly.
They're going to find a way, and that is the way. But it's dangerous. So parents are scared because our cities and places people go, I mean, they are full of dangerous things. Yeah. There may not be wild jaguars running around Phoenix, but there sure as heck are a lot of drug dealers. Yeah. There's a lot of people ready to get you into a bad relationship of domestic violence. There's terrible pyramid schemes and awful jobs that people get roped into.
There's a lot of pitfalls out there.
A lot of pitfalls.
Yeah,
so anyway,
absolutely.
sorry, I know you got a lot to say, but that just reminded me of that.
I was just going to say that one of the things you reminded me of there was that universal service would help with so many things, crime and drug use, and but also mental health issues too.
Yes.
So that just reminded me of that. But it also triggered me to think back that one of the things that we're telling the parents is that you are not the cause of the problem that your child has.
Sure.
But you have become made part of the problem by them when they have the addiction.
Right.
So the combination of this lack of emotional growth plus the addiction together is what creates hopelessness for the parents. Because we could have a young man who's 25 living in the basement, but he doesn't have an addiction issue. It's problematic, but there still can be forward movement and learning through experience.
Yes.
So we don't have hopeless parents. They're frustrated. But if you add the addiction in there, now the addiction shuts off the ability for the person to learn from their experiences. Now you have Groundhog Day. Oh. Every day is the same.
So let's talk about Groundhog Day.
Every day is the same.
Do you want to talk about Groundhog Day? I know you. Yeah. I'm a big fan of this movie. I've been a fan of this movie since I was a young person. I saw it in the theaters in the 90s. Somehow my parents let me go see that. I don't know how. I think maybe I was being watched by somebody. So anyway, but I know you're a big fan too. So tell me more about that.
This is something that someone sent me, and I want to acknowledge this is not from me, but this is someone sent me, and it says Groundhog Day and Emotional Maturity. One of my favorite movies of the 1990s is Groundhog Day. As someone in recovery, I feel a unique connection to it. Bill Murray plays the unforgettable character Phil Connors. Phil, unfortunately, is trapped into reliving the same day over and over again. His initial responses, like anyone in active addiction, are selfish. Not being able to move past his imprisonment, he tries, unsuccessfully, to kill himself.
Yes.
Eventually, he begins to adapt a sober state of mind. Phil accepts his circumstances. He accepts his circumstances. His motivations and behaviors transition from self-absorbed to a sense of generosity towards others. That's a transition period he goes through. He lets go of living his life simply for what he impulsively desires and instead focuses on doing the next right thing. His behavior becomes amended, and he embraces the true meaning of becoming an adult man. By the end of the movie, self-seeking has slipped away. Phil's whole attitude and outlook upon life has changed. By giving up his impulsive desires and instead following what he believes to be the most righteous path, he gains more than he ever desired. Phil Connors has found sobriety.
Ah, yes.
So,
and identity.
And identity, yes.
And a sense of mindful ease and contentment and joy and gratitude for helping people.
Absolutely.
Because he starts helping people in that movie. Go ahead.
Obviously, it's a metaphorical story.
Sure.
But if we look at that creative story, he was in a situation he had no control over, and he was just thrust into it. Adolescence.
Right.
He went only by his desires, his impulses, and tried to control everything and tried to change the situation that happened to him. Adolescence. Other people tried to tell him what to do. He rebelled. Adolescence.
Yes.
He already knew the answer to everything. When everyone started to talk to him, he already knew the answers. Again, adolescence. So those are three of the major signs of or characteristics of adolescence that's helpful for parents to know. Number one, teenagers know everything. Number two, they love to rebel, so they'll do things to get you to get on their case so that they can rebel.
Yes.
They'll get you to argue with them so that they can rebel.
Oh, yeah.
And the third thing is they're struggling to find out their identity, but may not really know that as far as being able to aware. They're not necessarily aware of their awareness. And so they're seeking transformation. You can't get to adulthood without growing into it, and that's transformation. And transformation is the kind of change that is different than regular change. And it's the kind of change where you take two opposing, an example of that is you take two opposite things and collide them together. Mm-hmm. They don't fit. So a good example of that verbally would be quiet, wordless talking would be a good example. Another one would be patient action. So, and again, children are locked into black and white thinking. Black and white thinking, and I mean black and white only thinking. Black and white only thinking is a natural developmental stage for children because it allows them to be guided while they're young and learning about life, and it's unambiguous. So, Dad, when you said don't cross the street without looking both ways first, do you mean all the time? Every time?
Right.
You don't have to say that with them because now they know that you've told them crossing the street with looking both ways is good. Therefore, not doing it is bad.
Right.
So it's a very simplified way of thinking that simplifies the world for them so that they can learn some basics to stay alive.
I think they call that concrete thinking level in the literature, and then we're moving towards abstract, which is the gray.
Exactly. Now here's what happens. The way that we're created in nature is we have a dual brain.
Yes.
Not a tripart brain, not a unibrain, a dual brain. It's just perfect for black and white only thinking.
Sure.
And so now we have a receptacles because the two brains are not connected directly. They're connected through a cable, the corpus callosum. So the whole left side of the brain is interconnected. The whole right side is interconnected, but they are not connected to each other directly. Right. So there's a separation here. And this is what allows us to separate things that are good, bad, things that are right and wrong, which is part of, we all learn that. So children in adolescence, if they don't develop the gray, which is in between.
Right.
That's what the Rite of Passage is all about. That's what the trial is all about. They have to have an experience that goes beyond good and bad, right and wrong. Because when you can discover what's right and wrong and what's good and bad, then you can control your world. So it's only when you're in a world that you can't control that you find resources and strengths within you didn't even know you had that are part of your identity to become the person that you are meant to be.
And that's transformation.
That's transformation.
And we're continuing to transform. I was actually going to ask you later at the end, one of the questions I always ask people when I'm interviewing them is, my new clinic is, of course, Grand Rapids Mental Health, and our tagline is where transformation begins. Because I feel like I'm continually transforming it, and that's my goal throughout life. But I was just going to say, what does transformation mean to Mike Speakman?
Well, if we look at it from a practical standpoint, it means doing things that you've never done before.
Right.
For instance, it means being willing to go into the unknown, because then you have to give up control.
Right.
trying new experiences, being open to new thoughts, challenging yourself, and letting other people challenge you. So, for instance, when you tell me about your political beliefs and they're the opposite of mine,
Sure.
I already know you're wrong.
Sure.
I already know you're wrong. But if I sort of in my mind force myself to be open, which is an unspeakable way, you can't tell a person how to do that. You can give clues and hints, but it has to be done internally. So one of the ways is to challenge your own beliefs, and the way you do that is looking for agreement, where what you're saying is the total opposite of what I'm saying. There is no agreement, but I'm looking for it anyway.
Sure.
And I'm trying to be open to that.
Where's something we have in common versus I'm just going to put you away in your category and label you. What's something in between us, and that even brings me into two quick comments about holding on to the opposites, which is a concept from Carl Jung in depth psychology, where we sometimes we have this reaction, this judgment, this automatic thing in our mind where we want to go good or bad or left or right or black or white. And what Carl Jung urged people to do in the counseling was not to label and not to jump to conclusions, but to sit there. And maybe that means journaling or thinking or whatever, or talking with people, but holding on to those two opposite concepts. For instance, joy and sorrow sometimes are paired together. For instance, the difficulties in life, but also the beautiful parts of life, those beautiful moments, and being able to kind of hold those in our mind and our soul, so that we can fully feel like we're alive. We're not just running from one or the other. We're meeting ourselves in the gray. And then also, this is a whole nother podcast about mindfulness. One of the things that we do in mindfulness, what the studies say is if you're, there's so many studies that say this, so I'm just going to quote it. If you're doing 20 or 30 minutes of the mindfulness meditation a day for 60 to 90 days, literally in brain scans, you have more gray matter, which helps you deal with stress more adequately. But one of the things that comes out of mindfulness a lot of times is not only are you literally getting gray matter in your brain built up and more resilience, you are actually being able to tolerate ambiguity.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
And you are able to be in today, because today really is all we know as a person, and we are only living in today, whatever today's date is. And and with people, we're constantly, of course, just like black and white, going future past. I'm in the future. I'm only thinking about the future, so I'm going to just eat. For the next week, I'm going to stay up, drink Red Bull, and eat McDonald's to get my project done. But I'm not thinking about the actual future, which is if I do that, the thing of what's going to happen to my body, or my productivity. We're out of balance, and so sitting in mindfulness, even if our brain is all over the place like a squirrel, like mine can be sometimes, brings us to a place of being in the present, which is an adult, I think is an adult skill that is hard to learn, because you can't learn it by intellectual means, and you can't learn it, I can't remember what the other one was you said, but it is an emotional and sort of spiritual experience to be able to sit in the present moment and to listen to your fears, because your fears are going to come up, and to listen to your anger, and we're going to get to anger, and to listen to your emotions that may be uncomfortable, and then notice that they're just like weather passing through, and eventually we will come through the trial. I've been through so many trials. I threw myself into them. I didn't know why, but I think looking back at my life, I threw myself into all sorts of trials, even though I was terrified, because I was sick of how I was living. I was sick of what was going on in my life. I was sick of where I lived. I was sick of who my friends were. I was sick of my behavior. And so I would say, no, I'm doing this now. I mean, I literally asked my parents to transfer schools as a child and as a high schooler 3 times. I was the impetus. I said, I want to change schools. I don't like this school. I don't like what's going on here. And I thought, of course, in my adolescence, probably this is an escape. There's a new horizon. There's a happy place. But what it really did was, there was no place that was perfect. It forced me to deal with my difficulties with peers. It forced me to deal with my difficulties with dating. It forced me to deal with some of the subjects like math that I was terrible at. And I couldn't get out of it. And I had to face it. And therefore, I did transform slowly. And hopefully, we're still transforming.
That's a good point, because one of the other things in the book for how to help drug-proof your child is to let your son or daughter when they're adolescents, make decisions about their life and their body and themselves that you normally would not let them do. For instance, green hair. For instance,
Sure.
move to another school. But I wanted to get back to what you're saying, because the way that we were built, the way our brain is built, we're built to be trapped in judgment of black and white only thinking, because two is exactly opposites. There's not, when you have three, there's not opposites.
Sure.
When you have one, there's not opposites. So two is the number. So transformation means I use my brain to create software. The gray in between the black and white is software. The brain is the hardware.
Yes.
So I'm born with the limited hardware, and maybe in some Christian religion they might actually say you're born sinful.
Sure.
Or sinful nature.
Sure.
You're born fallen, and different words that we have indicating that we're born with a handicap, with a problem. And I think we are born, I don't necessarily agree with different words about that.
Sure.
But I think to think that we are born to naturally learn to be happy, I think is simply not true.
Well, absolutely, because
we're challenged. We're born challenged.
Sure, and just speaking of the last couple thousand years, having anxiety was very helpful to keep us safe from lions, tigers, and bears, and Roman soldiers, and other tribes that are coming to kill us and take our stuff. So being anxious and that problem of always looking for a problem is actually preservation. For instance, if when I'm driving around this city, you better believe I got in the back of my mind death.
Yeah.
I need to be aware and not looking at my cell phone and not getting too into the music I'm listening to or the conversation I'm having, because I need to be watching out for cars. And just when I was coming here, I was taking a left at a green arrow, and the other people on the other side were taking the left at their green arrow, but somebody saw the green, and guess what they did?
Come straight through.
They started coming straight through, and we all honked, and it was a big truck, and luckily they didn't hit anybody, and they looked embarrassed. But I don't want that experience to I don't want anxiety to drive my car.
Exactly.
I want anxiety to be in the back seat going, hey, remember, this is serious. We're here. This is serious. But, like you said, we're born with this presupposition to look for the negative and to not be happy. So that being happy is, of course, contentment, joy. That's a whole nother podcast. But learning to be present with what is can bring that relief. To know that. Anyway, go ahead.
So what I'm going to say then is, if you then are stuck with black and white only thinking, then we could say you're stuck in your adolescence.
Sure.
Without a rite of passage, then it's going to go unnoticed. So there I was at 36 years old, laying there, wanting to end my life. I often say this to people: if we could go in a time machine and go back in time to the younger Mike and go, Mike, we just interrupted what you're doing here. Why are you doing this? Do you want to die?
Right.
I would have said, no, I don't want to die. And then we could say, you and I go together here. I could say, well, then why are you trying to kill yourself?
Sure.
Then I would have said, because I can't live with this pain. It was emotional. It was emotional pain.
Yes.
But I didn't even know what that was. I mean, I know it's emotion, but I had no idea what it was. And it was unrelenting, and it was off the scale, and I couldn't live with that.
Sure.
I mean, it was day after day, and it wasn't going
tormenting.
It was tormented because of the heartbreak of my wife leaving me. So, and then if we said, well, wait a minute, Mike, what if there's a way to end the pain without having to kill yourself? I would have said, there isn't.
Sure.
And then what if we would said, okay, one other question, Mike. What if there is a way to end that pain, emotional pain that you have, without having to kill yourself? What if there was a way to end it without having to kill yourself? I know me. Here's what I would have said. No. If we had said, what if there is a way to end the pain without killing yourself that you don't know about?
Oh, sure.
Then I would have said, there isn't. I would have caught myself.
Right.
There isn't anything I would have caught myself before I embarrassed myself.
Sure.
So now, if you then said, Mike, off the wall question, do you ever feel like you're a child inside? I would, hell no, look at my car, look at my house, look at my life.
Yeah, I've got it all together.
Yeah, that's before that incident.
Yes.
After that incident, I was opened in some ways. I was opened in some ways.
Yes.
So I went in and called my sister. She gave me the name of a counselor, and I couldn't wait. Called him. I couldn't wait to see him, and went to see him. And I just unloaded a lot. It was a 2-hour session with this guy, and he was the good person for me, because he listened. He listened to me. Now, I went to see him a lot. He was a big part of my recovery. At a certain point, maybe a month from there, a month of counseling, maybe a year of counseling, at some point, once I had my awakening and opening, if you had said, Mike, you're 37 now, do you ever feel like a child inside? Different answer than I would have before. I would have thought. And I would have went, yeah, sometimes I think I do now that you mention it, because I was open. And I started to have self-awareness.
Sure.
How can you have identity without self-awareness? So anyway, that was just my story. But you see where my story kind of ties into my work.
It ties into it. And being open is one of the hardest things to teach somebody again, because you can't really be open unless you humble yourself, have the self-awareness,
take the risk of being
vulnerable
and criticized, sure, and put down and embarrassed and all that other stuff.
And who's the philosopher? Was it Aristotle or Socrates? Somebody said, I should have been prepared for this, but they said, all I know is that I know nothing.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was Socrates.
I think that was one of those guys.
We'll be fact checked, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But that is such an important thing to live by. I think the same thing happened to me after my counseling experience. Before my counseling, when I went into counseling at 24 or whatever, 23, I knew everything.
Yeah.
Everyone told me, hey, do you know about this? Of course I do.
Yeah.
I know, and then I'll tell you more about it.
Absolutely.
I had this, closed attitude, this haughtiness to myself that, is regrettable, but I've transformed and I've made peace with that. But after counseling, I was like, wow, I know nothing. And the more I get into my career, 10 years in, I keep learning new things, and clients teach me new things as well. And if I can have that attitude every morning when I go in, that I've got my skills and I've got to be confident that I have those techniques. But if I can be open to what they're bringing, then I know that I can help that person, because they need me to be open, because they're trying to be open, and they need that openness to find out who they are, and have that self-awareness and all those things that they need to heal. And maybe they need tools that day, but sometimes we just need someone to listen.
Absolutely. But that transformation is also what the addict has to do.
Yes.
They need to transform. And so since the general population does not understand recovery and addiction, then it's kind of challenging. That difference in mindset and knowledge base is different. So the parents who don't really know about it are in a different state, a different point of view. But the transformation pressure on the addict to transform creates a little minor pressure for the parents to do some of their own work and to self-improve.
Well, and that's another thing, and I want to make sure we talk about PAL before we move on to anger. But that's another thing I've seen a lot, is when a parent comes in, no matter if it's a parent of an adolescent or a parent of a young adult or a parent of an adult, and they say, well, you know what, you need to fix them. Mm-hmm. They need to change. They're they're making stupid decisions.
Yeah.
But what we don't see, the parents may not see because they're angry and confused and hurt, is that if they do a little growing too, mm-hmm, and they change a little bit of how they're acting, that is eventually possibly going to get a payoff from the person that's struggling with the addiction. Now, of course, it's not going to be an instant payoff, because they didn't also become instantly addicted.
Exactly.
It took them a long time, and that dynamic is going to. I always said to people, I have a lot when I work with people that are struggling with addiction and have quit, or they're in recovery in some form, they're in the action stage. They keep coming in and they say, "Dang it, Paul, my parent, my brother, my sister, my roommate, my boyfriend, my girlfriend, they're still treating me like I'm using. Mm-hmm. What the heck is this?
Yeah.
I'm so pissed off." And I say, well, I read somewhere, and this is true, I have no idea where I read this, I can't find this anywhere, mm-hmm, that your people in your life are going to treat you the same for 6 months. That's how long it's going to take them to, mm-hmm, realize that you've actually changed, because it's not about what you said before. It's about your action. And I asked them, how many times did you tell them, I've changed, when you had no intention of changing? Exactly. And they said, well, I lied a lot, and I told them that. Exactly. And then 6 months later, if you stick to your guns and you're working on your recovery and you're being honest, even if you have a slip up and a relapse, they're going to start to trust you. And then you're going to see that change on their end.
That's a good point. The saying comes to mind that repetition is the mother of all new learning, and it takes time to change old habits. And so, but the point being is that the parents at first don't know that they need to make some changes in how they're parenting as a powerful way to help their son or daughter. initially they think all you got to do is change the son or daughter.
Yes, that is, and there is no magic pill for that.
No.
You can spend $60,000 on rehab, and if you don't change your parenting dynamics, the money you're giving your child, your boundaries, the way you're talking to them, they may come out and do the exact same. Not that it's all on you, because they still might be hanging out with their friends, and they might still be hell-bent on doing what they want to do. But if we don't change our relationship with the person struggling with the addiction, we can be sure that they're not going to change their dynamic.
But you can see how hard it is for them to change, because without the rite of passage, they don't have their wake-up call and a period of adjustment either.
That's correct.
So
yes. So we want to have empathy for both sides.
Yeah, yes.
I want to talk about anger, but I really want to talk real quick about PAL and just how can people learn about PAL and why is PAL so valuable? Parents of Addicted Loved Ones.
Yeah, PAL is Parents of Addicted Loved Ones. It's a group, a self-help group that I started about 11 years ago, and about 2 years ago I let parents take it over, because I had run it for a while, and a professional should not be running a parent support group that is run by parents. And it's different than Al-Anon in that it's not a 12-step format, it's an educational format. So we have 9 different educational topics, and we're basically teaching parents, these are new ways that you can start seeing your child in your mind's eye. Instead of seeing them as a child, see them as the adult that they are. Here's some new ways of talking to them, helping them understand this concept of rite of passage missing in a very simplified way. We call it delayed emotional growth. And by revealing to them that in most cases there's 2 problems. There's the addiction, but there's also the delayed emotional growth, which is the child development piece.
Right.
Those 2 issues collide together to create a spectrum of problems. And if you only understood the addiction and recovery piece, you would not be able to clearly see that whole spectrum of problems. You'd only see bits and pieces of some of them. And therefore, you could be chasing your tail a lot because you're not working on the delayed emotional growth part. You're only working on the recovery addiction part. And therefore, that other part could continue on and not change and still be an instigator of the behaviors. So in other words, we're saying that delayed emotional growth is as big or bigger an issue than the addiction itself.
Right.
And the 2 interact with each other. And until you get to the point where you're working on both simultaneously, then it's potentially that you're going to be hopeless for a lot of years.
Yes. And so the PAL group meets in 17 states, as I said in the introduction of the podcast. And the way people get a hold of the PAL group, and there's, what, about 19 meetings here in Phoenix or something like that?
Yes,
And then there's a few in Tucson and Arizona. But it's palgroup.org, which is P-A-L, PAL, group, of course, you know how to spell group, .org. Or just Google search Parents of Addicted Loved Ones or Mike Speakman. So, and it's a nonprofit.
Yeah.
You can find a meeting on there, a great video, great information on there. And, if you're in a state that does not have PAL, heck, you could start your own group eventually. If you get some training from the board of executives at PAL. And there's telephone meetings available, apparently, also. You guys are on Facebook now. I didn't realize that. Mm-hmm. And, of course, you can contact PAL. Also, the old-fashioned way, let's go there, 480-300-4712. So if you're not in on the internet, of course, I don't know how you'd find my podcast, but heck, if you don't like the internet too much, then you can just call them and learn. You could actually learn to be a facilitator and things like that. But if you're just a parent, you can hopefully find one in your area. And it is different than Al-Anon. It is educational, and Al-Anon and AA are fantastic programs. Some people aren't a fan of the 12 steps being in order like that, and so I think PAL is just a way for people to learn more, and it's very specialized to the parents of and or family members.
Spouses too can benefit
Spouses,
because
sure.
What will happen is the addicted spouse will act like a child, and the healthy spouse will fall into the parent role.
Oh,
so
yes.
by learning about these parent-child dynamics in PAL, it can be helpful for them as well.
Yes, and that's something that's interesting. It reminds me of my training with Dr. Robert J. Myers and Associates for the Community Reinforcement Approach, and they have a whole book also called Getting Your Loved Ones Sober, which is talking specifically to the spouse or partner, whatever, of the addiction, a person afflicted with addiction, to work on the behaviors, but also the emotional side. But I like your book better. But anyway, I'm saying that live on TV, on the podcast. So, so if you're interested in PAL, we gave you the information. I want to talk about anger and your anger book. So let's talk about that. And there you have it. That was part 1 of my conversation with Mike Speakman. In the next podcast, there will be part 2, which involves our conversation about anger and how to stay cool in an angry world. Thanks so much for listening to The Intentional Clinician. If you like our podcast, feel free to share it with friends and family. Also, you can rate us on iTunes, and that would be awesome. I hope to continue serving the online community here with podcasts coming out at least once a week for a while. If I can keep up this pace, there'll be more interviews and also my own thoughts. Thanks so much for listening. This has been Paul Krause. The recording you just listened to consists of the personal opinions of Paul Krause, and while these are based upon the literature he has read and his experience in the field, they should not be viewed as the definitive opinion on the subject. Listening to this podcast is not a substitute for treatment. If you are in need of counseling, don't hesitate to make an appointment with a local counselor in your area. You can find this by going to psychologytoday.com or talking to your local insurance company. You can also make an appointment with Paul or one of his associates by emailing or calling Paul. The information for this is on healthforlifegr.com or paulkrausecounseling.com. If you are in a crisis, please call 911 or the National Suicide Prevention Line. Call 1-800-273-8255. All right, hope everyone has a good day. Okay, so I'm here with Mike Speakman, asking him questions. We're talking about cinnamon rolls. So, Mike, tell me when you first had a cinnamon roll.
I can remember my first cinnamon roll when I was probably about 8 years old or so, and you could smell the wonderful smell of it baking in the oven. My mom was a great cook.
Oh, she made your own cinnamon rolls. You didn't go to Cinnabon or Dunkin' Donuts or anything.
Absolutely. She was a great German cook, so we had good meals. In fact, all of our kids, there's 4 of us, we were all spoiled by her cooking. And it made it hard when we got older and moved away, and where we're going to get that same kind of cooking. Plus, when you marry somebody, my brother and I, you've got a wife, she better be a good cook. So it did kind of set some important things from the past that went into the future there, all because of a cinnamon roll.
That's good. So you're a natural at this. Okay. We'll just pause for a second.